At 1 a.m., after my roof collapsed during a brutal blizzard, I carried my late wife's locked steel box and walked 4 miles through deep snow to my daughter-in-law's house, begging for shelter. She opened the door, dumped filthy ice water over me, and sneered, "You're making my porch filthy. Get out." I collapsed beside the road, certain I was dying. When I woke inside a warm truck, the driver removed his scarf, and I stared at my son dead for 5 years. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up? Just yes or no. I read every single one. Just a quick note, some details have been fictionalized to highlight the lesson, but the message about resilience and justice is what truly matters. The sound that woke me wasn't rain. It was the groaning of a roof deciding to quit after 40 years of holding. I opened my eyes to complete darkness. The clock radio beside the bed was dead. No red LED numerals, no static hum from the speaker. I reached for the bedside lamp. Click. Nothing. The power was out. Then I heard it again, a deep, slow creak from directly above, the kind of sound that makes a structural engineer sit up fast. I'd spent 35 years designing bridges across Texas. I knew what materials sounded like when they reached their breaking point. I am Lawrence Mercer, 68 years old, retired 2 years ago after my wife Phyllis died. I lived alone in the house we'd built together in Plano in 1983, and on the night of January 10th, 2023, at what I later learned was 11:15 p.m., that house was trying to kill me. I swung my legs out of bed. The floor was cold, colder than it should have been. The heating had been running when I went to sleep at 9. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. Snow. Piled against the glass, nearly 2 feet high, and still falling in thick, wind-driven sheets. The weather report that morning had called for 8 to 12 inches. This looked like 20, maybe more. The entire second-floor window was half buried. Another groan from the ceiling, louder this time. I could hear the timber joists shifting, the sound of weight exceeding design limits. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No signal. I tried the landline. Dead. No dial tone. 3 systems. Heat power phone. All dead. My engineering brain started running calculations automatically. A furnace can fail, thermocouples go bad, igniters wear out. A phone line can go down in a storm, ice snaps the cables. A circuit breaker can trip during a power surge. But all 3 systems failing in the same 6-hour window, all independent of each other, right before a blizzard reaches peak accumulation. The probability wasn't 0, but it was close. Close enough that the word sabotage entered my mind and wouldn't leave. The ceiling groaned again, louder. I looked up and saw the plaster beginning to bow inward between the joists. Hairline cracks were spreading across the surface like a road map of structural failure. Someone had done this. Someone had wanted the heat off the phone, dead, the power gone, wanted me trapped and unable to call for help when the roof came down. I had maybe 90 seconds. Engineers don't panic. We calculate. I ran through the options in the time it took to pull on my winter coat over my flannel pajama shirt. The staircase was directly outside the bedroom. If I could reach it before the ceiling gave way, I'd have a chance. If the roof had compromised the structural support for the second floor, the stairs might not hold. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway was intact for now. I could hear more groaning from above, spreading across the entire roofline. 20 hours of snow at the accumulation rate I'd seen meant roughly 1,800 pounds per square foot on a roof designed for half that. I turned back into the bedroom. In 40 years of marriage, Phyllis had kept exactly one thing locked away from me. A steel box about the size of a briefcase with a combination lock she'd never shared. She'd kept it in the back of our closet behind her winter coats. 15 years she'd had that box. I'd asked about it twice. Both times she'd said the same thing. When the time comes, you'll know. Phyllis had died 2 years ago, cancer, fast and merciless. She'd never told me the combination, never told me what was inside. The box had sat in that closet ever since, and I'd respected her wishes. But her words came back to me now, standing in a bedroom whose ceiling was seconds from collapse. When the time comes, you'll know. I grabbed the box. It was heavier than I remembered, maybe 30 pounds. The steel was cold against my palms, even through my coat sleeves. I didn't know what was inside. I didn't know why it mattered. But Phyllis had been a careful woman, methodical. If she'd kept this box locked for 15 years and told me I'd know when the time came, then this was the time. I made it 3 steps into the hallway when the bedroom ceiling gave way behind me. The sound was enormous, a crack like a rifle shot, then a roar as 40 years of roofing material, insulation, timber joists, and accumulated snow crashed down onto the bed I'd been lying in 2 minutes earlier. The impact shook the entire second floor. I felt the floorboards shift under my feet. I didn't look back. Engineers learn that early when a structure has decided to collapse. Nothing you do will save it. You can only save yourself by crossing the threshold in time. I took the stairs, fast steel box clutched against my chest. Each step groaned under my weight. I could hear more cracking from above. The roof failure was spreading. By the time I reached the ground floor, the entire second story was compromising. The front door was 12 feet away. I covered the distance in 5 seconds and yanked the door open. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Minus 18 degrees Celsius, the forecast had said. The wind was worse, gusting at what felt like 40 miles per hour, driving snow horizontally into my face. I was wearing flannel pajama pants, a winter coat, and house slippers. My car sat in the driveway, buried under 3 feet of snow, completely useless. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind me. Behind it, I heard another massive crash as more of the second floor gave way. 40 years of memories, photographs, furniture, Phyllis's clothes still hanging in the closet, the bedroom where we'd slept together for 4 decades, all of it collapsing into rubble. I stood on the front porch, steel box in my arms, and looked out into the whiteout. I couldn't see more than 10 feet. The street was invisible under the snow. The nearest house was dark. Everyone else had evacuated or lost power too. But I knew exactly one place within walking distance that would have a backup generator, heat, and shelter. My daughter-in-law Simone's villa, 4 miles south. She'd married my son Ronan before he died in a car accident 5 years ago. She'd stayed close to the family. She'd never refused me anything. I stepped off the porch into knee-deep snow, clutching Phyllis's locked box, and started walking into the storm. Behind me, my house, the one I'd built with my own engineering calculations, the one that had sheltered my family for 40 years, collapsed completely with a final deafening roar. I didn't look back. I made it 3 blocks before I stopped feeling my fingers wrapped around the steel box. The wind drove snow into my face at angles that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. I navigated by memory and occasional glimpses of street signs when the gusts died down for a second or two. Phyllis and I had driven to Simone's villa dozens of times over the years. 4 miles south, then west on Legacy Drive. In a car, 12 minutes. On foot, in knee-deep snow, wearing house slippers that were already soaked through, I calculated 90 minutes if I didn't stop. Stopping meant dying. The cold penetrated my coat in the first 15 minutes. By 30, my fingers had gone completely numb. I could still grip the steel box, I could see my hands holding it, but I couldn't feel the metal anymore. The disconnect between sight and sensation was disorienting. My face went numb somewhere around the 1-hour mark. I knew I was still walking because my legs were moving, but I'd stopped feeling my feet inside the slippers 20 minutes earlier. Hypothermia, I knew, followed predictable stages. Engineers studied failure modes: structural, mechanical, biological. The human body at minus 18 degrees Celsius shuts down peripherally, first pulling blood away from extremities to protect the core. Fingers, toes, nose, ears, all sacrificed to keep the heart and brain alive a little longer. I was somewhere in stage 2. Stage 3 was confusion, loss of coordination. Stage 4 was unconsciousness. Stage 5 didn't need a description. I passed a church, dark, locked, no lights. A gas station, abandoned pumps, buried. Every building I passed was either evacuated or without power. The only light came from the snow itself, an eerie white glow that made the world feel like the inside of a freezer. I checked my watch when I finally turned onto Legacy Drive. 1:17 a.m., 93 minutes since I'd left my collapsed house. Close to my estimate. Simone's villa appeared through the snow like a mirage. Every window glowed warm through the storm. The circular driveway had been professionally plowed, clean black asphalt, not a trace of the 18-hour snowfall that had buried my car and collapsed my roof. Landscape lights lined the walkway, illuminating the granite steps that led up to the front entrance. I could hear the backup generator humming from somewhere behind the house. Steady, expensive, the kind that kicked on automatically the second the grid power failed. Simone Mercer, 36 years old, had married my son Ronan 8 years ago. When Ronan died in a car accident 5 years later, she'd inherited everything he owned, including his stake in the family engineering firm my late wife Phyllis and I had built over 40 years. Simone had stayed close after Ronan's death. Family dinners every month, Christmas together, birthday cards. She'd called me Dad. What does a 68-year-old man calculate when he sees warm lights through frosted windows and knows the person inside has the power to save or condemn him? You don't think about odds. You think about what matters. I thought about Phyllis, about Ronan, about the fact that family was supposed to mean something, even when blood couldn't be restored. I climbed the granite steps. Each one took effort I didn't know I had left. The steel box weighed 30 pounds, but my arms had stopped registering the strain. I made it to the front door and pressed the doorbell with my numb right thumb. I heard the chime inside, footsteps approaching. A pause. She was looking through the peephole, I realized. Seeing me standing there in frozen pajama pants and a snow-covered coat beard crusted with ice holding a steel box, the deadbolt turned. The door opened 6 inches. Simone stood in the gap, backlit by the warm glow of her foyer. She was wearing a silk robe, her dark hair pulled back. She looked at me for 3 full seconds without saying anything. "Please let me in," I said. My voice came out cracked, shaking. "My house collapsed. I need help." She disappeared from the doorway. For half a second, I thought she'd gone to open the door wider to grab towels or call for medical help. She came back holding a plastic bucket. I didn't understand what I was seeing until she threw the contents at my chest. Dirty water. Gray cold, smelling of floor cleaner and mud. It hit me square in the center of my coat and soaked through, immediately adding wet weight to the frozen fabric. "You're dirtying my porch," she said. Her voice was flat, matter of fact. The same tone she might use to tell a delivery driver he'd parked in the wrong spot. I stood there, water dripping from my coat onto the granite, and tried to process what had just happened. This was Simone. The woman who'd cried at Ronan's funeral with her head on my shoulder. The woman who'd helped Phyllis organize the company Christmas parties. The woman who'd signed every birthday card to me, "Love your daughter." She looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger asking for spare change. No recognition, no concern, nothing. "Simone," I managed. "Please." The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place with a solid mechanical click. I stood there for another 10 seconds, waiting for the door to open again, waiting for this to make sense. It didn't open. Inside, I heard her footsteps retreating down the hallway, growing fainter, then disappearing entirely. 6 inches. That's all the space between a father who raised you and a door that closes forever. I looked down at my hands, hands that had calculated load capacity for 47 bridges across Texas. Hands that had held my newborn son, hands that had signed Ronan's death certificate 5 years ago. They were bone white. I couldn't feel them at all anymore. The dirty water was already starting to freeze on my coat. I could feel the weight of it, not the cold, just the weight pulling down on my shoulders. I turned away from the warm lights and looked back at the storm. My footprints from the walk up her driveway were already disappearing, filled in by fresh snow. In another minute, there'd be no evidence I'd been here at all. Behind me, through Simone's windows, I could see the glow of her fireplace. I could see her shadow moving past the glass, heading upstairs. I stood on her granite steps in minus 18 degrees Celsius. My beard was frozen to my face. The dirty water was freezing on my coat, adding weight I couldn't afford to carry. I didn't know where to go. I only knew I couldn't stay still, or I would die right there on her professionally maintained porch. I started walking. The strangest thing happened. When I finally stopped moving, the snow began to feel warm. I'd walked another 85 minutes after leaving Simone's villa. I didn't have a destination. I just knew that standing still meant dying, so I kept my legs moving through the drifts, one foot in front of the other, clutching Phyllis's steel box against my chest. My right knee buckled first. No warning, just a sudden collapse of the joint like a support beam giving way. I caught myself pushed forward 3 more steps, and then my left knee went too. I fell face first into the snowdrift on the side of Route 114. The impact should have hurt. Should have knocked the air from my lungs, should have sent a shock through my frozen limbs. Instead, I felt nothing. Just the sensation of snow against my cheek, and that snow felt warm, comfortable. Almost like a heated blanket someone had wrapped around me. I'd read about it once in an engineering journal back in 1998. An article about hypothermia in extreme conditions written by a researcher who'd studied mountain rescue cases in the Rockies. The final trick your brain plays before shutdown, it makes freezing feel warm. Paradoxical undressing, they called it. The body's core temperature drops so low that the blood vessels near the skin suddenly dilate, sending a rush of warmth to the surface. The brain interprets this as overheating. Mountain climbers found stripped naked in the snow because their dying brains told them they were burning up, the body's last lie before the lights go out. I was in the final stage. The steel box had fallen from my hands when I collapsed. I could see it lying in the snow about a foot away, but I couldn't make my arms reach for it. I couldn't make anything move anymore. A structural engineer knows when a system has reached critical failure, the moment when no intervention can reverse the collapse, when the only variable left is time. I'd reached that moment. My core temperature had dropped below the threshold where the body could self-recover. Even if someone found me in the next 5 minutes, even if they got me to a hospital, the damage was probably irreversible. I closed my eyes, thought about Phyllis, wondered if she'd be waiting wherever I was going, or if consciousness just stopped, and that would be all. Either way, at least the cold didn't hurt anymore. At least I'd go out thinking about her instead of about Simone's door slamming in my face. I heard an engine. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. The brain does that too in the final stages, creates sounds and images to fill the void as the neurons start shutting down. But the sound grew louder, closer. The distinctive rumble of a truck engine, 4-wheel drive, something heavy enough to push through the drifts. Headlights cut through the blizzard. I saw them through my half-closed eyelids, 2 beams of light sweeping across the road, slowing, pulling onto the shoulder, about 20 feet from where I lay. The engine stopped. A door opened, boots crunching through snow, coming toward me. I tried to speak, to call out, but my jaw wouldn't work. The muscles had locked up from the cold. A hand slid under my arms, lifting. Strong hands. Stronger than I expected. The person who'd found me wasn't struggling with my weight. They lifted me like I weighed nothing. I caught the smell of an old cologne. Something familiar. A scent I hadn't smelled in years, but recognized instantly, the same one Phyllis used to buy every Christmas. The same one I'd smelled on dress shirts hanging in a closet that belonged to someone who wasn't here anymore. The person was carrying me toward the truck now. I still couldn't see their face. They had a heavy winter scarf wrapped up over their nose and mouth, a knit cap pulled low. But I felt the way they placed a hand on my shoulder to steady me. A gesture I recognized before my brain could even process it. I knew that touch. The truck door swung open. Warmth poured out, blessed, burning warmth. The person lifted me into the passenger seat, reached across to pull the seatbelt over my chest, then grabbed the steel box from where it had fallen and set it on my lap. Heat blasted from the vents so intense it hurt. I could feel my frozen skin starting to burn under the sudden temperature change. My hands looked bone white against the dark steel of the box. The driver climbed behind the wheel and slammed the door. The interior light stayed on for a few seconds, long enough for them to pull down the scarf. How do you process a ghost? A man whose death certificate you signed, whose funeral you sat through, whose grave you visited every Sunday for 2 years. Ronan Mercer was 38 years old. He had his mother's dark eyes, and my build, tall, broad-shouldered, the frame of someone who'd worked construction summers during college. 5 years ago, the police had called to tell me he'd died in a single-car crash on I-35. Truck veered off the highway at 70 miles per hour, rolled 4 times, caught fire. The body had been burned badly enough that identification required dental records. I'd stood at his grave. I'd watched them lower the casket into the ground. I'd signed the papers transferring his share of the company to Simone, his widow. And now he was sitting in the driver's seat of a Ford F250, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're not real," I managed. My voice came out as barely more than a whisper, words slurred from hypothermia. "I'm hallucinating. Final stage." He reached over and placed his hand on my shoulder again. The same gesture, the same pressure. Real. Solid. "You're not hallucinating, Dad," he said. His voice was exactly as I remembered it, low, calm, the measured tone he'd inherited from me. "I'm here. I'm alive. I've been alive this whole time." I stared at him. My brain couldn't process the information. Dead people didn't come back. Engineers didn't believe in miracles. How? I started, but my teeth were chattering so hard I couldn't finish the question. He turned back to the wheel and threw the truck into gear. We pulled back onto Route 114, heading north through the whiteout. "You need to drink something hot first, Dad," he said. "Then I will explain everything." The coffee burned my throat going down, but I welcomed the pain. It meant I was still alive. Ronan had driven us to a small apartment in East Austin. We'd arrived just after 4 in the morning. The place was sparse, blank walls, minimal furniture, nothing personal visible anywhere. An encrypted laptop sat on a small kitchen table. A single lamp cast warm yellow light across the room. He'd handed me the coffee without asking how I took it. Black. The way I'd always drunk it. The way he remembered. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, still trying to process the fact that my son, the man whose funeral I'd attended, whose death certificate I'd signed, was standing in front of me, making a second cup. "The car crash," he said, sitting down across from me. "The one in 2018. It was staged." I waited. My brain still felt slow from the hypothermia thoughts moving through fog. "How not staged by someone else trying to kill me?" he continued. "I staged it myself. I discovered Simone was having an affair with Roland Garrett 3 months before our wedding. Roland Garrett. The name landed like a stone. I knew him. Everyone in the Dallas engineering community knew him. Owner of Garrett Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring small to mid-size companies. He'd approached Phyllis and me twice over the years about buying Mercer Engineering. Both times we'd refused. I didn't have strong enough evidence to confront them, Ronan said. If I'd accused them directly, they would have denied everything, and I'd have shown my hand. So I chose to disappear to investigate from the outside, where Roland couldn't touch me. You faked your own death, I said slowly. To investigate your bride-to-be's affair. Not just an affair, Dad. He opened the laptop and turned it toward me. This was never about romance. The screen showed a series of emails. I recognized Simone's address at the top. The recipient was listed as RG-Garrett Capital. These started 2 months before she even met me, Ronan said. Look at the dates. I scanned the thread. The earliest message was dated March 2018. Ronan and Simone hadn't started dating until May of that year, I remembered, because he'd brought her to Phyllis's birthday dinner that month. How do you reconcile attending your son's funeral, placing your hand on a closed casket, signing cremation papers, scattering ashes in the lake where he learned to fish with the man sitting 3 feet away drinking black coffee? You don't. You just keep listening. So, it was never about love, Ronan said. It was a business plan. Roland needed an insider within Mercer Engineering. Simone needed financial backing to escape $2.3 million in personal debt gambling losses, bad investments, credit cards maxed across 8 accounts. He clicked to another file. Bank statements, credit reports. The numbers were staggering. They made a deal, he continued. Simone would marry into the Mercer family, gain access to company operations, feed information to Roland. In exchange, he'd clear her debt and pay her a percentage of the acquisition value once he took control. And you were the vehicle, Ronan finished. I was the easiest target. Unmarried, working directly in the company, trusted by you and Mom. If Simone married me, she'd have direct access to everything: financial records, client lists, operational details, board meetings. I set the coffee down. My hands had stopped shaking from the cold, but now they were shaking from rage. Stay for 5 years, I've been Daniel Marsh, he said. Independent consulting engineer. I pay rent in cash, have no social media use, prepaid phones that I change every 3 months. I'm not running, Dad. I built an observation post to watch them, to document them. He turned the laptop back toward himself and opened another folder. 60 files. Every email between Simone and Roland, every shell company transaction, every forged document, every lie they've told over 7 years. Why didn't you go to the police? Have I said? Because Roland doesn't just want money, Dad. He wants the entirety of Mercer Engineering Group, 35 years of engineering prestige, 200 government contracts, and specialized licenses that Garrett Capital can neither buy nor replicate. Those licenses took decades to earn. They can't be transferred. They die with the company unless the company continues under different ownership. I'd spent 40 years designing structures that could withstand calculated loads. My son had spent 5 years documenting a conspiracy designed to destroy everything I'd built. If I'd gone to the police with incomplete evidence, Ronan said, Roland would have hired the best defense attorneys in Texas and buried everything in litigation. We'd lose the company fighting him in court. I needed ironclad proof, the kind that leaves no room for reasonable doubt. He opened another file. 2 documents filled the screen. Death reports. Roland has done this before, Ronan said quietly. Twice. The first report was dated October 2019. Marcus Brennan, age 54, business partner in a Dallas commercial real estate firm. Died in an apparent home invasion 2 months after closing a $12 million transaction with Garrett Capital. No arrests case unsolved. The second was dated March 2021. David Holbrook, age 47, attorney, specializing in Caribbean shell companies. Disappeared in Belize 3 months after finalizing a $9 million deal involving offshore trusts managed by Roland. Body never found, declared legally dead after 1 year. Both of them had information Roland couldn't afford to leave alive, Ronan said. Both refused to sell him additional assets after the initial deals closed. Both died within 3 months. I stared at the screen. 2 men. 2 deaths. 2 patterns. Now Roland has done this before, Ronan repeated. Twice. Both times he left no witnesses. How did you survive 5 years without anyone discovering you were alive? The question came out before I could stop it. I was still staring at the death reports on the laptop screen. Marcus Brennan, David Holbrook, both eliminated after their usefulness to Roland had expired. My hands were steady on the coffee mug, but my mind was racing through calculations. If Roland had killed twice before in other business dealings, what had he done within Mercer Engineering itself? Ronan closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Morning light was starting to filter through the apartment windows, turning the walls from yellow to pale gray. See Daniel Marsh, he said. Independent consulting engineer. That's who I've been for 5 years. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulled out a folder, and set it on the table between us. Inside was a Texas driver's license with his photo and a different name. A bank statement showing modest deposits. A lease agreement for this apartment signed in cash. I pay rent in cash, he said. I maintain no social media accounts. I change prepaid phones every 3 months. It wasn't about running away, Dad. It was about building a safe observation post where Roland couldn't see me even if he looked. For 5 years, every week I tracked Roland from a distance. Every month I added another document to the file. 5 years equals 60 files, transaction records, meeting schedules, shell company formations, email intercepts. I learned to be invisible. The kind of invisible that takes discipline, not just hiding. I looked at my son across the table. He'd lost weight since the funeral, leaner, harder. His hair was longer than he used to keep it. Small changes that added up to someone who could walk past you on the street, and you wouldn't recognize him unless you were looking for him specifically. I became someone Roland couldn't see, Ronan said, because he wasn't looking for someone who didn't exist. The engineering precision I'd taught him, calculate the variables, eliminate the risks. Build systems that don't fail, had been repurposed for survival. My son had become a ghost to save his life. I'd become a target without knowing it. How did you know I was on Route 114 last night? I asked. Now, I've been monitoring Simone's security cameras for 3 years, he said. When I saw you arrive at her villa and saw what she did, he stopped. His jaw tightened. I tracked the most likely route you'd take leaving her property. Route 114 was the main road. I drove it until I found you. He opened another folder. This one was thicker, filled with printed documents held together with paper clips. There's something else you need to know, he said. Roland didn't just kill people in his other business ventures. He's been eliminating obstacles within Mercer Engineering, too. He spread 2 sets of documents across the table. Robert Ellison, he said, pointing to the first stack. Do you remember him? I did. Robert Ellison had been a minority shareholder in Mercer Engineering since 2009. Quiet man, kept to himself, attended board meetings twice a year. Structural engineer like me, though he'd specialized in residential rather than commercial projects. He died in 2021, I said. Car accident. Car accident on the I-35. Ronan confirmed. Dry weather. Straight road. Middle of the afternoon. No witnesses. His vehicle crossed 3 lanes of traffic, went through a guardrail, and rolled down an embankment. Police report said he must have had a medical episode, heart attack, stroke, something sudden. He slid a document toward me. It was a medical report dated 2 months before the accident. Clean bill of health. No heart disease, no high blood pressure, no neurological issues. And this, Ronan said, sliding another paper across. It was an email. Robert Ellison to Roland Garrett. Subject line: re-acquisition offer. I read it. 3 sentences. Polite but firm. Thank you for your interest in my shares of Mercer Engineering Group. After careful consideration, I must decline. I believe the company's future is best served by maintaining current ownership structure. The date on the email was 3 weeks before the accident. James Whitmore, Ronan said, pointing to the second stack of documents. I remembered James, too. Older than Robert, late 60s when he died. He'd held shares since the company's founding, one of Phyllis's early business partners. Late-night stroke, I said. Alone in his office, 2021. Bye to stroke with no history of heart disease, Ronan said. No high blood pressure. No family history of cardiovascular problems. He was found dead at his desk at 2 in the morning. The medical examiner ruled it a stroke brought on by stress and overwork. He slid another email toward me. James Whitmore to Roland Garrett. Same subject line. Same polite refusal. The date was 17 days before his death. How do you calculate the probability of your own murder when you're holding evidence that 2 men with similar holdings died under impossible circumstances within weeks of saying no? You can't. The variables are too contaminated. The sample size too small. But the pattern is clear enough that an engineer recognizes structural failure when he sees it. Robert owned 18% of Mercer Engineering, Ronan said. James owned 23%. Together, they controlled 41%, almost as much as you hold alone. He pulled out one more document. It was a company shareholding report dated January 2023. My name was at the top of the list. 42%. Phyllis had owned another 31% before she died. Her shares had transferred to me according to her will. Between the 2 of us, we'd held 73%, a controlling majority that couldn't be challenged. But now, with Phyllis gone and 2 other shareholders dead, the ownership structure had shifted. I held 42%. Simone, through her inheritance from Ronan, held 15%. The remaining shares were scattered among smaller investors who'd bought in over the years. You're the largest remaining shareholder, Dad, Ronan said quietly. And you still haven't signed any papers for Roland. The drive back to Plano took 3 hours, through roads the plows had finally cleared. I needed to see the house. Not the wreckage, I'd already seen that in the dark. I needed to see the roof, the engineering, the failure point. If someone had sabotaged my house to make it collapse during the blizzard, there would be evidence. Structures don't lie. They fail according to physics, and physics leaves fingerprints. Ronan drove. I sat in the passenger seat with Phyllis's steel box on my lap, still locked combination unknown. We didn't talk much during the drive. What was there to say? I was the largest shareholder who'd refused to sell. 2 others with smaller stakes had refused and died. The pattern was clear enough that silence felt appropriate. We arrived at 11 in the morning. The snow had stopped. The sky was that bright crystalline blue you only see after major storms, the kind of light that makes everything look sharp and unforgiving. My house looked worse in daylight than it had in the dark. The entire 2nd floor had collapsed into the 1st. The roof was completely gone, just exposed timber joists sticking up at broken angles like ribs. Snow covered everything in a clean white blanket that made the destruction look almost peaceful. We climbed through the wreckage carefully. The basement stairs were still intact. The garage was accessible from the side. Ronan had brought a toolbox from his truck flashlight measuring tape digital camera. The ridge beam was where I'd expected to find it, half buried under snow and collapsed drywall in what used to be the master bedroom. It had split lengthwise along a fracture line that ran almost perfectly straight. "Help me clear this," I said. We pulled away insulation-broken plaster chunks of roofing shingle. After 10 minutes of digging, we'd exposed the beam's connection point to the main support column. I knelt down in the snow and looked at the bolts. "These weren't rotted," I said. Ronan crouched beside me. "What do you mean?" I pointed at the bolt threading. "Look at this." The bolts were loosened deliberately, then rethreaded just enough to hold under normal snow load. Under a 100-year blizzard, they were designed to fail. He leaned closer, pulling out a flashlight to examine the threading pattern. I could see it in his face, the same recognition I was feeling. An engineer knows the difference between natural failure and deliberate sabotage. "Whoever did this knew structural engineering," I said. They knew the 1987 design load rating of this roof. They knew exactly how much snow it would take to exceed capacity. 40 years I'd spent designing structures to withstand calculated loads. Now someone had calculated the exact load that would kill me using the same precision I'd spent a lifetime teaching others. Ronan picked up one of the bolts. It was still partially threaded. He turned it over in his gloved hand, examining the head. He said quietly. "Look at these tool marks." I took the bolt from him. The marks were faint, but visible small scratches in a specific pattern around the hexagonal head. I recognized them immediately. "This is a torque wrench," I said. "The type we use on Mercer engineering projects. The Snap-on Industrial Series leaves this exact pattern when you set it to 20 foot-pounds or lower. So whoever did this, they had access to our equipment." I finished. "Someone inside the company, or someone who worked closely enough with us to borrow tools." We stood there in the ruins of my bedroom, snow melting on our shoulders, holding evidence that my house hadn't just collapsed, it had been executed. "We need to document this," Ronan said. He pulled out his camera and started taking photographs. Close-ups of the bolts, the threading, the tool marks, the fracture line in the beam. I watched him work, methodical, precise. The way I'd taught him. We drove back to Austin in silence. By the time we returned to the apartment, it was 2 in the afternoon. I was exhausted, not from the physical work of digging through the wreckage, but from the weight of understanding what it meant. Someone had tried to kill me. Someone with engineering knowledge, access to company tools, and enough patience to sabotage a house weeks in advance. I set the steel box on the kitchen table. "I need to open this," I said. Ronan nodded. "Do you know the combination?" "No." But Phyllis wouldn't have left it locked if she didn't expect me to figure it out. I tried her birthday first. Month, day, year, 6 digits. The lock didn't move. I tried our wedding anniversary. Nothing. I tried Ronan's birthday. The lock clicked. The lid opened. Inside were 3 envelopes nested one inside the other. The outermost envelope was plain white, unsealed. I pulled it out. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in Phyllis's handwriting. The address of this apartment. Below it, a phone number with an Austin area code. She'd been dead for 2 years. I'd mourned alone, visited an empty grave, eaten dinner in silence every night since the funeral. And all that time, she'd left me a roadmap I'd been too grief-stricken to see. I pulled out my phone, the one I'd carried from the collapsed house, miraculously undamaged, and dialed the number with hands I couldn't keep steady. The ringtone echoed in the quiet apartment. Then I heard it. A second ring coming from somewhere in the room. Ronan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a prepaid phone. The screen was lit up. "Incoming call." "Your mother knew," I said. My voice cracked on the words. Ronan looked at me across the table. "I know she knew, Dad." She was the one who helped me. She discovered the conspiracy 6 months before she died. Ronan's voice was quiet. We were still sitting at the kitchen table, the steel box between us, one envelope opened and two still sealed. The phone that had rung in his pocket was now sitting on the table beside Phyllis's handwritten note. When I asked, "How, mid-2020? June, I think." She never told me exactly how she found out, just that she'd been going through company financial records and noticed patterns. Transfers that didn't make sense. Meeting schedules that seemed designed to exclude you. I tried to picture it. Phyllis at her desk in our home office, spreadsheets open on her laptop, finding evidence of the conspiracy that would eventually try to kill me. 6 months before the cancer diagnosis. 7 months before her death. She didn't tell you because she knew you, Dad, Ronan said. Knew you'd confront them directly. Walk into Roland's office or call a board meeting and lay out the evidence. And that would have gotten you killed immediately. He was right. That's exactly what I would have done. Engineers solve problems by identifying them, analyzing them, and addressing them head-on. Phyllis had known me for 40 years. She'd known I couldn't hide what I knew. She came to me instead. Ronan continued. Called me in July 2020. Told me what she'd found evidence that Simone and Roland were planning to take the company. She said I needed to disappear before they realized I knew anything. And you believed her. I'd already started noticing things myself. Simone asking questions about company operations she'd never cared about before. Roland showing up at too many company events. Mom just confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. He opened the second envelope and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn map, Phyllis's handwriting, again, neat and precise. A street address. A building diagram. A unit number. She helped me prepare everything, Ronan said. The Daniel Marsh identity documents, the Austin apartment lease, the offshore bank account for receiving consulting payments. She funded my disappearance from her personal savings, $23,000 she'd kept separate from the joint accounts. $23,000. I'd never known about it. Never questioned why she had separate savings. I'd trusted her completely. She made me promise not to tell you until the right moment, Ronan said. Not until you were in immediate danger and had no other options. She said you'd mourn my death, and that would be painful, but at least you'd be alive to mourn. My wife had spent her final 7 months protecting me from a truth she knew would destroy me. I'd spent 2 years mourning alone, never understanding that her silence was the greatest act of love she could give. So she died 7 months later, Ronan said. I sat at her funeral watching you cry, knowing I couldn't tell you I was alive. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Dad. But I'd made her a promise. I looked down at the map. Austin Commerce Bank. Storage Unit 347. The name at the top said Phyllis Brennan, her maiden name, the one she'd carried before we married. What's in the storage locker? I asked. Is evidence, Ronan said. Documents she collected, meeting recordings, financial records, everything she found before she died. She told me the locker existed, but made me promise not to access it until you were ready, until you knew the truth. I folded the map and set it down carefully beside the steel box. We need to go to the police, I said. We can't. Why not? Ronan pulled out his laptop and opened another file. This one showed campaign contribution records, public filings from the Texas Ethics Commission website. Roland owns Collin County Sheriff, he said. $180,000 in campaign contributions over 6 years. The county judge received $95,000. Any report we file through local channels lands on Roland's desk before the FBI ever hears about it. I stared at the screen. The numbers were right there in public records. Legal donations. Perfectly documented influence. How do you fight for justice when the people sworn to deliver it have been purchased like equipment on a project bid? He's built a network, Ronan said. Not through bribes or illegal payments, through campaign contributions, charity donations, business partnerships, all completely legal, all completely corrupt. So we bypass them, I said. Go straight to state or federal authorities. Texas State Attorney General, Ronan agreed. Or San Antonio FBI Field Office. Both are outside Roland's immediate reach, but they won't act on circumstantial evidence and suspicious deaths. They need something ironclad, something they can't ignore, and Roland can't bury. He closed the laptop and looked at me across the table. And we need proof that Roland directly ordered this, he said. Not through Simone, not through an intermediary. His own voice or his signature on documents that show intent. Otherwise, his lawyers will bury us in motions and depositions before we ever get to trial. Do we have that kind of proof? Ronan reopened the laptop and pulled up a different file. Security camera footage. I recognized the location immediately, the Mercer Engineering boardroom. The timestamp said the footage was from 3 months ago. I've been recording for 3 years, Dad, he said. 847 hours of footage. I installed cameras in the boardroom and the CEO's office legally as a founding shareholder with security concerns. Roland thinks he's been careful, but he's been in our boardroom 23 times since Mom died. And people who think they're safe get careless. He clicked play on one of the videos. The angle showed the boardroom table. Roland sat at the head Simone to his right. The audio was clear. We need proof Roland directly ordered this, I said again. His own voice or signature. Ronan looked at me with something that might have been a smile. Then let me show you what I have. The first video loaded at 6:17 p.m. time-stamped March 14, 2021, Mercer Engineering main boardroom. Ronan had queued it up before I could ask questions. The angle was from the corner of the room, positioned to capture the entire conference table. The video quality was sharp, professional security camera grade, not some hidden spy equipment. Roland sat at the head of the table. My chair. The one I'd sat in for board meetings since 1987. Simone was to his right, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. The cameras are completely legal, Dad, Ronan said, reading my expression. I'm still a founding shareholder under the company bylaws. My death certificate doesn't revoke that until probate closes, which we never filed. I have legal access rights to install security equipment in company facilities. I hadn't thought of that. The legal technicality that kept his shareholding active even after he was declared dead. It was the kind of detail Phyllis would have known, would have told him about. How much footage do you have? I asked. For teaching 3 years. 847 hours total. Roland has been in our boardroom 23 times since Mom died. This meeting, March 2021, 2 months after her funeral, he's sitting in your chair discussing how to handle people who are no longer necessary. Ronan unmuted the audio. Roland's voice came through the speakers, clear and measured. I recognized his tone, the same one he used in business presentations. Confident. Professional. The old board members are the primary obstacle, Roland was saying on the recording. Robert and James both need to be handled before we can move forward with the restructuring. Robert Ellison, James Whitmore, the 2 shareholders who died within months of that meeting. Simone's voice on the recording, handled how? Roland's answer. I have people who specialize in making problems disappear without creating questions. Once they're out of the picture, the ownership structure shifts in our favor. Ronan paused the video. That was March 14th, he said. Robert died in the car accident on April 3rd. James had his stroke on September 22nd. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I'd just heard. Not a confession Roland hadn't explicitly ordered murders, but close enough that combined with the actual deaths, it formed a pattern. "There's more," Ronan said. He pulled up a different file on the screen. "You mentioned a roof maintenance company when we were at the house. Do you remember the name Lone Star Structural Services?" I said. "The invoice was from last October." He nodded and turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a corporate registration chain, the kind of document trail I'd seen before when tracking shell companies for tax purposes. "Lone Star Structural Services, LLC Hunks," he read. "Registered under Texas Holdings Group, which is registered under Meridian Asset Partners, which is owned by Garrett Capital Investment Group, Roland's companies, all of them. He sent his own people to sabotage your roof," Ronan said. "For 40 years, I'd designed structures to withstand wind and snow and earthquake loads. Now my son and I were designing a different kind of structure, one built to withstand legal pressure and collapse a conspiracy from within." We sat at that kitchen table for the next 3 hours, drinking coffee that got cold and reheated twice, building a plan. Stage 1. Ronan said, writing notes on a yellow legal pad that reminded me painfully of the one Simone had used in the video. "You return to Dallas. You contact Simone. You pretend you want reconciliation." "She threw dirty water on me," I said. "She's not going to believe I want reconciliation. Yao, you're old. You're alone. You don't want to die bitter. Whatever story she'll believe, you've spent a week thinking about it, you're tired of fighting, you just want family peace before you die. Under Texas one-party consent law, you can legally record every conversation as long as you're part of it." The boy I'd taught to use a torque wrench was now teaching me how to use the law as leverage. We worked as equals across that table, not father teaching son, but two engineers solving a problem neither could solve alone. Stage 2. He continued. "I keep harvesting office footage and prepare the full evidence package for San Antonio FBI. Office videos, shell company documents, shareholder death reports, your house sabotage proof, everything. But we don't submit it yet. Why not? Because we need Roland directly on record. Not discussing handling problems in vague terms. We need his voice or his signature explicitly ordering a crime. Otherwise, his lawyers will argue he was speaking hypothetically, that the deaths were coincidental, that the shell companies are legitimate business structures." He was right. I'd seen enough corporate litigation to know how easy it was to argue plausible deniability. Stage 3, Ronan said. "Once we capture Roland's voice or signature connecting him directly to the conspiracy, we trigger everything simultaneously. You submit your recordings to San Antonio FBI. I deliver the complete evidence package. We coordinate the timing so he can't bury one before the other surfaces." "Timeline?" I asked. "We have until March 15th, 2023, he said. "That's when Roland plans to finalize the Mercer engineering takeover." I found the date in one of Simone's emails. "After that, even if we prove the conspiracy, unwinding the corporate transfers gets exponentially harder. 14 months. It felt like both too much time and not nearly enough." I stood up to leave. It was past 11 at night. I'd been awake for nearly 40 hours, survived hypothermia, discovered my son was alive. Learned my wife had orchestrated everything from beyond the grave. Ronan's voice stopped me at the door. "One more thing, Dad. The third envelope in Mom's steel box. She wrote specific instructions on the outside." We both looked at the sealed envelope still sitting on the kitchen table beside the empty coffee mugs. I walked back and picked it up. The handwriting on the outside was Phyllis's clear and deliberate, "Only open when everything is ready." "Not yet," I said. I dialed Simone's number on January 13th at 2:47 p.m., 2 days after leaving Austin. Those 2 days had been spent preparing. Ronan had helped me rent a small, furnished apartment in North Dallas, nothing permanent, just a temporary base close enough to Plano that it would make sense I'd chosen to stay in the area. We'd rehearsed the script. Not word for word that would sound fake, but the emotional beats. Broken, exhausted, not angry. Just an old man who'd lost everything and didn't want to spend his remaining years carrying bitterness. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Simone, it's Lawrence." Silence on her end. I could picture her calculating, wondering why I was calling, whether this was a threat or a lawsuit or something else. "So I know things have been difficult," I continued. My voice sounded exactly as broken as I needed it to. "But I need to talk to you. Not about blame, just to talk." More silence. Then, "What do you want?" "Just to talk," I repeated. "Face to face, please." Another pause. "Fine. There's a cafe on Preston Road. Tomorrow at 10. She hung up before I could respond. I met her the next morning at a quiet place with corner tables and weak coffee. She arrived exactly on time, wearing a black coat that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in 6 months. She sat down across from me without offering to shake hands or acknowledge the last time we'd seen each other, when she'd thrown dirty water on my chest and locked the door. "What do you want, Lawrence?" she asked again. I took a slow breath, let my shoulders sag a little. The engineering brain had switched off emotion entirely and activated calculator mode. "I'm old Simone," I said. "I don't want to spend whatever time I have left carrying bitterness. You're the only family I have left now. Can we at least try to move forward?" She studied my face. I kept my expression neutral, tired, maybe a little sad, but not angry. Not accusing. "Forward how?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe just talk sometimes. I'm alone in a rental apartment. The house is gone. Phyllis is gone. Ronan is gone. You're all I have." Every word was a knife cutting my tongue. But 40 years ago, I'd taught structural engineering students how to calculate precise loads, how much weight a beam could carry, how much stress a joint could withstand. Now I was calculating the exact emotional load Simone would believe. Weak enough to trust. Desperate enough to manipulate. "I'll think about it," she said. She left after 15 minutes. I sat alone with my cold coffee recording device still running in my coat pocket, feeling like I'd betrayed something fundamental about who I was, but the trap required it. The next day, January 15th, I called her again. This time I let my voice tremble slightly, manufactured confusion mixed with elderly uncertainty. "Adin Simone." "I found something," I said. "Some of Phyllis's old papers in that steel box, the one I was carrying that night. They seem to be about the company's assets, but I don't understand any of this financial language. I need someone to explain what this means." I heard her breathing change. Interest. Calculation. "What kind of papers?" she asked. "Legal documents. Asset transfers, I think. Maybe trust documents, I don't know. It seems like Phyllis left something important, but I can't make sense of it. I don't know what to do with this information." 4 seconds of silence. I counted them. I could practically hear her brain running through scenarios, what Phyllis might have left, what documents might exist, what leverage or problems they might create. What does it cost a man to beg help from the person who left him to freeze to death? The answer, whatever price justice demands. "Of course, Dad," she said, using the word she'd never used when throwing water on me. "I can help you with that. Why don't I come by tomorrow and we can look at these papers together? You shouldn't have to worry about this alone." The concern in her voice was almost convincing. "Thank you," I said, injecting genuine relief into my tone. "I'm at 4750 Beltline Road, apartment 23B. Would 2 o'clock work?" 2 o'clock is fine," she said. I'll see you then. I set the phone down after she agreed to visit. 30 seconds later, my burner phone, the one Ronan had given me with encrypted messaging, buzzed with a text. She just called Roland. Office camera caught it. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. She's reporting everything you said. I stared at the message. 3 minutes and 17 seconds. That wasn't a quick update call. That was a detailed briefing, what I'd said, how I'd sounded, what papers I'd mentioned, what the plan should be going forward. I texted back, "What now?" Ronan's response came immediately. "Exactly what we expected. She's coordinating with him. This proves ongoing conspiracy. Tomorrow when she visits, the recorder will be running. Keep playing confused and vulnerable." I looked around the small apartment. Furnished, rental, bland, and anonymous. A place where a lonely old man might end up after losing his house and his family. The story was believable because parts of it were true. I had lost my house, I was alone, I did need help. The only lie was that I'd forgiven her. I pulled out my real phone and opened the voice memo app. Ronan had shown me how to set it to record automatically when Simone arrived tomorrow. Texas one-party consent law meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of. Everything she said would be admissible evidence. The trap was working exactly as designed. Now the question was what Roland had told her to do during that 3-minute, 17-second call, and whether they'd take the bait all the way to the confession we needed. Simone arrived at 2:47 p.m., 7 minutes late. She never used to be late. That told me Roland had briefed her thoroughly, delayed her departure just enough to rattle me, make me think she'd changed her mind. But I'd spent those 7 minutes double-checking Ronan's work. The recorder inside Phyllis's steel box was transmitting perfectly to his monitoring station 3 miles away. I opened the door before she could knock. "Come in," I said, keeping my voice soft. She wore the same perfume Phyllis used to wear. The steel box sat on the coffee table exactly where Ronan and I had positioned it that morning. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I really don't understand these papers Phyllis left." Simone sat across from the box. Her eyes lingered on it for half a second, then moved to me. "Of course, Dad. That's what family does." The word family came out smooth, practiced, as if she hadn't left me to freeze a week ago. "The papers are in the box," I said. "But I don't know the combination. I've tried her birthday, our anniversary, everything." Simone looked at the box again. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. "Do you want me to try?" she asked. "Would you?" She knelt in front of the box. Her fingers rested on the combination dial for 3 seconds. Then she began turning it. Click, click, click. The lock opened. She lifted the lid, as if she'd done it 100 times before. As if Phyllis's most private box, the one my wife had kept locked for 15 years, was something Simone had always had access to. She'd opened this box before. She knew the combination. Phyllis had died 2 years ago. How long had Simone been going through her things? Simone reached inside and pulled out the manila folder Ronan and I had prepared fake asset transfer documents that looked real enough. "These look like trust documents," she said. "Did Phyllis mention setting up a trust before she died?" "I don't know. She handled the legal matters. Simone was visiting alone. No lawyer, no Roland. Just her going through a box she shouldn't have been able to open. That meant she was trying to isolate me, exactly what Roland would have told her to do. It confirmed their coordination. "These documents mention Mercer Engineering," she said. "It looks like Phyllis was planning some kind of restructuring." "What kind?" "Protection from instability. After Ronan died, there was risk that the company's ownership could create problems." "Were you and Phyllis working on this together?" Simone hesitated. "We discussed it a few times. She was concerned about the company's future, and Roland, was he involved?" Longer hesitation. "Roland has been helping me understand the business side. After Ronan died, I inherited his shares, but didn't know how any of it worked." Roland explained it. He's been protective of the company's interests. Unprotective how? She set the folder down and looked at me directly. Dad, I need to be honest. There are people trying to take advantage of your situation. People who think you're vulnerable because of the house your age because Phyllis is gone. Roland and I have been protecting Mercer Engineering from those people. Before I reveal what Simone said in those next 47 minutes, comment A, if you think she confessed everything, or B, if she kept manipulating to the end. Add one reason in 5 to 10 words. Quick note, what follows includes some dramatized details to convey the emotional truth. The message is what stays with you. Back to that recording. What people, competitors, other engineering firms that want to acquire us while we're weak. Roland has industry connections. He's been helping me fend off hostile approaches. Smooth, practiced, almost believable. And the contracts, I asked. I heard something about contracts being restructured. Her expression flickered. Some old contracts needed updating. Phyllis started that process before she died. Roland helped me finish it. Standard business management, Dad. Nothing to worry about. Was my absence part of standard business management? The question hung in the air. Your absence. I haven't been included in board meetings for 24 months. Not since Phyllis got sick. Was that part of protecting the company? Simone's hands stilled on the folder. You were grieving. We didn't want to burden you with business decisions while you were losing Phyllis. It was mercy, not exile. It felt like exile. I'm sorry you felt that way. But everything Roland and I have done has been to protect what you and Phyllis built. The company needs stability. It needs clear leadership. And honestly, Dad, you haven't been in a position to provide that. 47 minutes, that's how long she talked. How long she explained that every decision removing me from meetings, restructuring contracts, working with Roland behind my back, had been for my own good. For the company's good. Every word was being recorded. She told me Ronan had been poisoning my mind before he died. That Phyllis would have wanted the family together. That the contracts were restructured for efficiency. That my exile wasn't their idea, it was necessary. She incriminated herself completely, thinking she was manipulating a confused old man. 47 minutes. Ronan's voice came from my burner phone, still face down on the table. That's enough, Dad. Simone froze. Her eyes went to the steel box, still open. To the false bottom she'd moved aside. To the recorder now visible in the lining. Texas is a one-party consent state. I said quietly. I consented. You just confessed. 3 days after the recording, Ronan arrived at my apartment with a laptop, 2 external drives, and a manila envelope marked, Office Security, Do Not Open. Simone had left without saying another word. She'd stared at the recorder for 10 seconds, then walked out, leaving the steel box open on my coffee table. I hadn't heard from her since. Neither had Ronan, according to his monitoring of her phone and email activity. She'd gone silent, which meant she was either planning something or falling apart. Ronan set the equipment on my kitchen table and opened the laptop. I need to show you something, he said. Office camera caught this 2 nights ago. 11:47 p.m. He pulled up a photograph. High resolution. Color. Clear enough that I could see every detail. Roland Garrett sat in my chair. Not just any chair in the Mercer Engineering boardroom. My specific chair. The one at the head of the table. Custom made in 1987 when we'd opened the main office. High-backed leather with reinforced lumbar support designed for my exact height and build. Roland sat in it like he'd been sitting there for years. Behind him on the wall was the framed photograph from the 1991 bridge project, the Henderson Creek Bridge, the first major government contract Phyllis and I had won together. Our names were engraved on a small plaque at the bottom of the frame. On the table in front of Roland, were construction plans, blueprints by the look of them. And next to the plans, a yellow legal pad with handwriting I could read even in the photograph, Phase 2 after legal procedures completed. He thought everyone was gone, Ronan said. Cleaning crew had already left. Security cameras run 24 hours, but most people forget about them after midnight. I stared at the photograph. That chair was custom-made for me in 1987. He was sitting in it like it was already his. Look at the note on those plans, Ronan said. Phase 2. What's Phase 1, Tatakum? I knew what Phase 1 was. Get me out of the company. Isolate me. Remove me from decision-making. Sabotage my house so I'd be vulnerable, desperate, easy to manipulate or eliminate. Phase 2 would be the legal completion of the takeover. The paperwork. The official transfers. Making permanent what Roland had already claimed as his. He's already moved in, I said quietly. Ronan nodded. Psychologically, at least. He's treating it like a done deal. Cold rage settled in my chest. Not hot anger that would have been easier to manage. This was the kind of fury that calculates, that plans, that waits for the right moment to act. Ronan closed the photo and opened a different file. There's something else, he said. I've been analyzing the email archives, looking at communication patterns between Simone and Roland over the past 3 years. He pulled up 2 emails side by side on the screen. This one's from Simone, he said, pointing to the left. March 2021, she's writing to the board about restructuring company operations. Look at the phrasing. I read it. Professional language, corporate terminology, recommendations for streamlining processes, consolidating divisions, reducing overhead. Now look at this one, Ronan said, pointing to the right side of the screen. Roland's email to his business partner, same day, 2 hours earlier. The phrasing was identical. Not just similar word for word, identical in 3 separate paragraphs. She copied it, I said. Ronan pulled up another pair. Then another. Then another. Email after email spanning 3 years. Every major decision Simone had communicated to the board, every strategic recommendation, every operational change, all of them traced back to Roland's words, written hours or days earlier. 3 years, I said. She's been his mouthpiece for 3 years. I realized then Simone thought she was winning. She thought she was the architect of this conspiracy, the mastermind working with Roland as an equal partner. She had no idea she was just Roland's puppet. She thinks she's the mastermind, Ronan said, echoing my thoughts. But Roland wrote every word. She was never the architect. She was the relay, the visible face while he stayed invisible. It made strategic sense. If the conspiracy ever came to light, Simone would take the blame. She was the one on all the emails, all the board communications, all the official documents. Roland's name appeared nowhere in the company records. He was just a concerned business advisor, a family friend helping a widow understand her inherited shares. Ronan opened another file, a timeline he'd constructed, showing every major decision in the company over the past 3 years, color-coded by who had initiated it. Red for Simone's communications, blue for Roland's earlier instructions. The screen was almost entirely blue, with red echoes following hours or days later. How she never commanded a single major decision, Ronan said. Not one. Everything came from Roland. The contract restructuring, the board meeting schedules, the financial audits, the personnel changes, all of it was Roland's design. Simone just executed his instructions. Why use her at all? I asked. Why not do it himself? Hatiko. Plausible deniability, Ronan said. And expendability. When this goes to court, every piece of evidence points to Simone. Roland can claim he was just advising her, that he had no idea she was acting illegally, that she manipulated him too. What happens to puppets when the puppeteer no longer needs them? I thought about the footage Ronan had shown me weeks ago. The meeting where Roland had talked about handling Robert Ellison and James Whitmore. Both shareholders had died within months. Ronan leaned back, closing the laptop with the final email comparison still visible on screen. "You see what this means, right?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "It means Roland used her to do his dirty work," I said. "And when this goes to court, when the evidence comes out and the prosecutors start building their case, Roland is going to discard her once she's no longer needed," Ronan finished. My daughter had no idea she was already expendable. The footage was 4 days old when Ronan finally decrypted it, January 28th. Roland's office, 11:13 p.m. But what it showed made my blood stop. We'd been analyzing the email patterns, understanding how Roland had used Simone as his visible proxy, while staying invisible himself. That's when Ronan had mentioned there was one more piece of encrypted footage he'd been working to unlock. Office security footage from the night Simone had signed the latest round of asset transfer papers. It had taken him 4 days to break the encryption. Now, sitting in my Austin apartment on February 1st, I watched the silent video play on Ronan's laptop. No audio, video only. But I didn't need sound to understand what I was seeing. Roland sat at his desk, alone. Simone wasn't in the frame. The timestamp in the corner read 11:13 p.m., well after business hours, well after anyone else would have been in the building. A man I didn't recognize entered the frame. Mid-40s, maybe. Wearing jeans and a dark jacket. He sat down across from Roland. On the desk between them was a printed map. Even from the security camera angle, I could make out the property lines, the driveway layout. "Now that's a property map," Ronan said, pausing the video. I leaned closer. "That's Simone's villa, the one she bought 2 years ago. The villa she'd bought with what she'd claimed were inheritance funds, but were actually diverted company assets. The same villa where she'd thrown dirty water on me and locked me out in the cold." Ronan unpaused the video. The stranger studied the map for maybe 30 seconds. Roland said something I couldn't read his lips from this angle. The stranger nodded, reached into his jacket pocket. Roland opened a desk drawer and pulled out what looked like a bank envelope, the kind you get when you withdraw large amounts of cash. He slid it across the desk. The stranger opened it, counted the bills. Even without audio, I could see his thumb flicking through them methodically. 20, 40, 60 bills. Ronan said quietly. "That stranger just took $20,000 in cash. This isn't a real estate consultation." The stranger pocketed the envelope, stood up, took the property map, and left the frame. Roland sat alone at his desk for another minute, then powered down his computer and left. End of footage, January 28th. I said, checking the timestamp again. "That's the same day Simone signed the additional transfer papers." Ronan nodded. "The same day she completed the final legal step in giving Roland control of the company's operating accounts. The day her usefulness ended. When does a father choose between justice and his daughter's life? The question sat between us in the quiet apartment. Simone had conspired to destroy me, had helped Roland sabotage my house, had isolated me from my own company, had thrown water on me and locked me out to die in the cold. But she was still my daughter, and Roland was planning to kill her. "Well, we need to warn her," I said. Ronan looked at me. "Dad, she tried to kill you. She's been working with Roland for 6 years to steal everything you and Mom built." "Why would you?" "Because I'm not Roland," I said. "I don't eliminate people when they're no longer useful." Ronan started to respond, then stopped. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression changed. "What?" I asked. He turned the phone toward me. "Security alert from Simone's villa. Motion detected at 7:47 p.m. The timestamp was from 4 days ago, the same night as the footage we'd just watched." Ronan pulled up the security feed. It showed the stranger from Roland's office walking up to Simone's front door. He didn't knock. just stood there for 30 seconds studying the property. Then he walked the perimeter of the house, checking windows, exits, the layout, casing it, learning the territory. Then he left. He's planning the approach, Ronan said. We sat in silence for a long time. Then on February 5th, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I answered anyway. Hello, breathing on the other end. Fast, shallow. Someone trying to stay quiet. Then, Dad, I need to meet you. Simone's voice, but completely different from every other time I'd heard her speak over the past 6 years. No arrogance, no calculated manipulation, no control, just raw fear. Simone, what's wrong? She didn't answer. I heard something in the background, a door closing maybe. Footsteps, then the line went dead. I stared at my phone. Who was that? Ronan asked. Simone! What did she say? 3 words, Dad, I need to meet you. Then she hung up. Ronan pulled up his monitoring system, the one tracking Simone's phone and email. Her last location ping was at her villa, 20 minutes ago. Then her phone went offline. Offline. Either she turned it off or someone turned it off for her. I thought about the stranger with the property map, the $20,000 in cash, the perimeter check of her villa. I thought about Roland's pattern, Robert Ellison dead 3 weeks after refusing to sell. James Whitmore dead 17 days after sending his rejection email. I thought about Simone's voice on that call. The fear, the desperation. The phone went dead. 3 seconds of silence. Then I was already grabbing my keys. Oh, where are you going? Ronan asked. To meet her. Dad, this could be a trap. Roland might be using her to... Then it's a trap, I said. But I'm not letting him kill my daughter while I sit here calculating odds. Ronan stood up, closing his laptop. Then I'm coming with you, he said. The daughter who'd stolen my company, who'd been recorded in that steel box, admitting conspiracy, who'd worked for 6 years to destroy everything Phyllis and I had built. She was now running from the man she'd conspired with. And I had maybe hours to decide, let Roland finish what he'd started, or save the person who'd destroyed me. She was already waiting when I pulled into the parking lot, leaning against her Mercedes, no makeup, eyes swollen from crying. Ronan and I had driven straight from Austin when Simone called back 20 minutes after that first terrified call. She'd given me a location, a supermarket parking lot, on the edge of the city, far from anywhere either of us normally went. Neutral ground, she'd said. Safe. Ronan stayed in the truck, monitoring from 50 yards away. I walked across the parking lot alone. Simone looked up when she heard my footsteps. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Thank you for coming, she said finally. Her voice was hoarse. I didn't respond, just waited. I heard him, she said. Roland. On the phone. 3 nights ago. I was at his office waiting for him to finish a call. I wasn't supposed to be listening, but I heard him through the door. What did he say? He said... Her voice cracked. She took a breath and started again. He said, the intermediary has completed her task. Final phase doesn't require her. Clean it up. She looked at me, waiting for a reaction. You're the intermediary, I said. I know. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know what that means. I've seen what happens to people who are no longer useful to Roland. Robert, James. They both refused to sell, and they both died within weeks. And you think he's planning the same for you? I know he is, Dad. I heard him say it. Clean it up. He's going to kill me. You have to help me. I looked at her for a long moment. My daughter, 36 years old, standing in a parking lot begging for protection from the man she'd conspired with for 6 years. Why did you throw dirty water on me? I asked. She blinked. What? Shatikonai. January 11th, the night my house collapsed. I walked 4 miles through a blizzard to your villa. You opened the door, saw me freezing to death, and threw dirty water on my chest. Then you told me I was dirtying your porch. Why no ja? Simone's mouth opened, but no words came out. I needed help, I continued. I was hypothermic, wearing pajamas and house slippers in -18 degrees, and you locked the door and left me to die. Why, Roland said. I don't care what Roland said. I'm asking what you thought, what you felt, when you saw your father-in-law freezing on your porch. She looked down at her hands. You only came here because you're afraid to die, I said. Not because you regret what you did. During the blizzard when I needed you, you threw dirty water. You never regretted it. You are just terrified. The words hung in the cold February air. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, you're not. You're scared. There's a difference. I turned to leave. Dad, please. I stopped. Reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. Set it on the hood of her Mercedes. What is this? She asked. I looked at her one more time. Texas State Attorney General. If you want protection, earn it. Testify. Then I walked back to Ronan's truck. I watched her drive away. My daughter. Running from the monster she'd helped create. 3 days later, on February 10th, Ronan pulled up new office footage. We were back at my apartment. He'd been monitoring the security cameras remotely, downloading encrypted files every night. Most of it was routine Roland coming and going, occasional meetings with attorneys or business partners. But this footage was different. Roland sat at his desk alone, studying something. Ronan zoomed in the camera angle. It was a dossier. Maybe 20 pages thick. Roland was flipping through it slowly, methodically. Then he stopped on one page and leaned closer. The camera angle caught what he was looking at. A photograph. Ronan went completely still beside me. That's me, he said quietly. I looked closer. It was definitely Ronan. Standing outside a building, coffee cup in hand, wearing casual clothes. The photo quality was professional telephoto lens, high resolution. When was this taken? I asked. Ronan studied the background. 3 months ago, outside my office building. The one where I work as Daniel Marsh. Someone's been following me. On screen, Roland picked up his phone and made a call. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language told the story. He stood up, paced, gestured sharply with his free hand. Roland thinks you've been dead for 5 years, I said. Now he knows you're not just alive, you're here helping me. Ronan nodded slowly, watching the screen. Look at him. That's not anger. That's tactical recalculation. He's accelerating something. Roland hung up the phone. Then he smiled. That was worse than rage. That was the smile of someone who'd just figured out how to turn a problem into an advantage. The footage ended. Ronan and I sat in silence for 10 seconds. How long do we have? I asked. Ronan's jaw tightened. 48 hours, at most. Once Roland knows I'm alive and helping you, he'll move fast. He can't let us get this evidence to authorities. He'll either try to eliminate us or accelerate his takeover and disappear the assets before we can freeze them. I reached for my phone. What are you doing? Ronan asked. Trigger final stage, I said. 41 hours into our 48-hour countdown, Ronan discovered our lawyer had worked for Garrett Capital 3 years ago. The final stage meant assembling everything, evidence packages for the FBI documentation, for the state attorney general legal filings, to freeze Roland's assets. We'd been working non-stop since triggering the plan. That's when Ronan had run a routine background check on my ownership lawsuit attorney, the one representing me in the case to reclaim company control. Dad, Ronan said, turning his laptop toward me. Your lawyer billed Garrett Capital for 127 hours in 2020. Legal consulting. It's not illegal, but Roland knows every strategy we've filed. I finished. We're fighting with compromised counsel. We had less than 48 hours before the crucial hearing. Finding new legal representation on that timeline was nearly impossible. I have a backup, Ronan said. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a law office in downtown Austin. Corinne Delaney, 42, partner at Delaney and Associates, sat across from us reviewing the case files Ronan had brought. She was the attorney who had defeated Roland Garrett in a 2019 land dispute, sharp, relentless, and apparently still holding a grudge. "This is solid work," she said, flipping through the evidence documentation. "Whoever put this together knows what they're doing." That would be me," Ronan said. 5 years of surveillance." She looked up. "That's dedication." "That's survival," Ronan replied. Corinne set the files down. "I beat Roland Garrett once. 2019 land dispute over water rights in West Texas. He tried every dirty trick in the book, fabricated surveys, intimidated witnesses, bribed inspectors. We still won. He still hasn't forgiven me." "Will you take the case?" I asked. "When do we start?" Corinne handed me the retainer agreement. "One condition," she said. "When we win, I want to see his face." 2 days later, on February 14th, Ronan and I stood in the half-finished Mercer Engineering Building, the new headquarters construction project that had been ongoing for 8 months. The structure was nearly complete, but not yet occupied. Steel framework, concrete floors, electrical systems being tested. We were there to inspect the emergency fire suppression system. At least that's what anyone checking the building permits would see. In reality, we were meeting someone. The construction lights cast harsh shadows across the unfinished space. Concrete pillars rose to the ceiling. Exposed ductwork. The smell of fresh paint and metal. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. I turned. Simone emerged into the light. But she wasn't alone. A woman in a dark suit followed her FBI based on the badge clipped to her belt. Simone had gone to the state attorney general. Just like I'd told her to. She stopped when she saw us. Her eyes went to Ronan first, then back to me, then to Ronan again. "Ronan." Her voice was barely a whisper. Ronan stepped forward into the construction lights. Simone's face went white. You died," she said. "The accident. 5 years ago. I went to your funeral. Roland told you I was dead," Ronan said calmly. "Just like he told you Dad abandoned the family. How many of his stories were true?" Simone's hands were shaking. I could see her brain trying to process what her eyes were seeing. Her husband. Dead 5 years. Standing in front of her under construction lights. The FBI agent stepped back, giving them space but staying close enough to hear. "You've been alive," Simone said. "This whole time. 5 years. You let me think." "I let you think what Roland wanted you to think," Ronan said. "Because that kept me safe while I gathered evidence of what you and he were doing." Something broke in her face. The defenses she'd built over 6 years, the justifications, the rationalizations, the careful compartmentalization of guilt, all of it collapsed at once. "He ordered it," she said suddenly. "The roof. Your mother." The FBI agent's hand moved to the recorder in her jacket pocket. "Tell me," Ronan said. "Shaitiu," he said, eliminating 2 shareholders would simplify succession. Simone said. The words came out in a rush now, like she'd been holding them in for too long. "Robert Ellison first, then your mother. He said it had to look natural. Accidents, illnesses, nothing that would trigger investigations." "And you helped him," I said. "I helped him." She looked at me. "God help me, I helped him. I gave him the house access codes. I told him when you'd be alone. I signed off on the contractor invoices, the ones for Lone Star Structural Services. I knew what they were for." "What were they for?" the FBI agent asked quietly. "Sabotage," Simone said. "Roof sabotage, heating system tampering, phone line cuts, all timed to fail during the blizzard. It was supposed to look like weather damage." She turned back to Ronan. "He told me you died in an accident," she said. "The car crash. I believed him. I went to your funeral. I cried. And the whole time I was 3 hours away building a case against both of you. Ronan finished. Simone's legs seemed to give out. She sat down on a concrete block, head in her hands. I thought I was his partner, she whispered. I thought we were building something together. Then I heard him on the phone. Clean it up. That's what he said. Clean it up. Like I was garbage. The FBI agent stepped forward, recorder now visible. Ms. Mercer, everything you just said has been recorded with your knowledge as part of your cooperation agreement with the State Attorney General. Do you confirm that your statements are voluntary? Yes, Simone said. Then I heard it. The construction elevator motor, cables humming. Someone was coming up. I looked at the site foreman's schedule posted on the temporary wall. After hours, access was restricted to authorized personnel only. Only one name had clearance for tonight. Roland Garrett. The elevator doors opened, and Roland Garrett stepped onto the construction floor, then froze when he saw Ronan standing under the work lights. 5 seconds of perfect silence. Roland's face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, calculation. His eyes moved from Ronan to Simone, sitting on the concrete block, to the FBI agent with the recorder, to me standing near the emergency control panel. You're dead, Roland said, looking at Ronan. The accident. 5 years ago. You're dead. Oh, you told everyone I was dead, Ronan said calmly. Just like you told them my father abandoned the family. How many lies, Roland? Roland took a step backward toward the elevator. His hand moved toward his pocket. Don't! The FBI agent set her hand on her weapon. Federal agent, keep your hands visible. Roland's hands came up slowly. Empty. He wasn't armed. He'd never needed to be. He'd always had other people do the violent work for him. This is entrapment, Roland said. His voice was steady, controlled, already thinking like a lawyer. Whatever Simone told you was coerced. She's been under duress, clearly not in her right mind. She came to us voluntarily, the FBI agent said. Under the protection of a cooperation agreement with the State Attorney General. Roland's eyes went to Simone. You betrayed me. You were going to kill me, Simone said quietly. I heard you. Clean it up. That's what I was to you. Garbage to clean up. I moved toward the fire emergency control panel. It was mounted on the wall near the main support column, a red metal box with a keypad. Building code required emergency override access for consulting engineers on active construction sites. Roland saw me moving. What are you doing? He asked. I opened the panel cover. Fire emergency override. Consulting engineer access. I input the code November 7 Mike 81. The system accepted it with a soft beep. You're not leaving, Roland, I said. I pressed the activation button. The sound was enormous. 6 steel fire shutters dropping simultaneously over the 6 exits, emergency stairwells, elevator shafts, loading dock. Each one sounded like a giant hammer striking an anvil. The building shook. 6 shutters. 6 exits. 6 hammers falling. Roland was trapped in a steel cage of his own company's design. Roland spun toward the nearest exit. The steel shutter had already sealed it completely. He ran to the next one. Same result. Emergency protocol once activated, the shutters couldn't be opened from inside without fire department override codes. Roland turned back to us, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. This is illegal confinement, he said. You can't. The side entrance shutter lifted. Police poured through, 6 officers in tactical gear, weapons drawn. Behind them, 2 more FBI agents. They'd been waiting outside on state AG coordination. The whole building had been under surveillance since we'd arrived. Roland Garrett, one of the officers said. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, corporate fraud, and extortion. They had him on the ground in 15 seconds. Hands behind his back. Cuffed. Read his rights while he lay on the concrete floor of the building that bore my family's name. I watched them lift him up and walk him toward the exit. He looked at me once as they passed. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, February 15th, Ronan and I walked into the Texas State Attorney General's office in Austin. Corinne Delaney was already there, sitting at a conference table with 2 FBI representatives. The table was covered with file folders, hard drives, and evidence documentation. Ronan set down one more box. The final piece. 5 years, he said. I've been building this case for 5 years. Corinne opened the first folder. 60 files, 847 hours of surveillance footage, 2 separate confessions, one recorded under Texas one-party consent, one given voluntarily to FBI under cooperation agreement. This is the most documented resurrection case I've ever seen. One of the FBI representatives, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, picked up Ronan's file. "Mr. Mercer," she said. "Ronan Mercer. We'll need to verify your identity through fingerprints and DNA analysis, but this evidence package supports an immediate review of your death certificate. The court will need to formally vacate it, which typically takes 60 to 90 days. I can wait 90 days, Ronan said. I've been dead for 5 years. 3 more months won't kill me. The FBI representative didn't smile. You understand that once the death certificate is vacated, you'll need to reestablish all legal documentation. Social Security number, driver's license, bank accounts. The Daniel Marsh identity will need to be formally dissolved. And I understand, Ronan said. Corinne slid a document across the table toward me. This is the preliminary asset freeze order. Roland's accounts, Garrett Capital Holdings, and all shell companies traced to his control. Effective immediately. The court will review the evidence and make final determinations, but for now, he can't touch any of it. I signed where she indicated. The FBI agent closed the final folder. Welcome back from the dead, Mr. Mercer, she said. We walked out of the State Attorney General's office into February sunlight. Ronan and I, father and son. The 2 Mercer men standing in the parking lot of law enforcement evidence submitted arrest, executed resurrection, documented. Finally, after 5 years of exile and 5 years of death, not alone, Roland Garrett was arrested on February 14th, 2023, Valentine's Day. I watched from the State Attorney General's office as federal marshals walked him out of Garrett Capital headquarters in handcuffs. Even from 12 stories up, I could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he held his head high, despite everything. 63 years old, 35 years building an empire. All of it ending in a perp walk. Tyson, he's been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts, Corinne Delaney said beside me. Plus RICO violations, corporate fraud, extortion, and witness tampering. Federal prosecutor is pushing for maximum sentencing. What about Marcus Brennan and David Holbrook, I asked. Those cases are too cold to charge, Corinne said. No physical evidence survives and both happened outside Roland's dealings with us. But the prosecutor is using them to show pattern of conduct at sentencing. And Simone, a cooperating witness. Her testimony is what makes the murder conspiracy charges stick. Corinne closed her briefcase. She'll get a reduced sentence, probably home confinement, restitution, professional restrictions. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. When's the trial? No trial. Roland's attorney is negotiating a plea. They know what we have: the encrypted footage, the recorded confession, the shell company paper, trail, the intercepted communications. Going to trial would be suicide. She was right. By March, Roland had accepted a plea agreement. 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. All assets frozen pending restitution hearings. Garrett Capital dissolved board members under investigation, every shell company account seized. The company, my company, the one I'd built from nothing, reverted to Ronan and me by court order. Mercer Engineering. 51% me, 49% my son. Phyllis's original bylaws had been so carefully constructed that even Roland's 3-year manipulation couldn't fully penetrate them. Your wife was brilliant, the forensic accountant told me during the asset recovery process. Most of Roland's transfers were technically legal because she'd built in redundant approval requirements. He could move money, but he couldn't actually steal it. Not permanently. Phyllis. Always 3 steps ahead. Even when she couldn't fight anymore, she'd built structures that would fight for her. Simone's sentencing hearing was in August. I sat in the back of the courtroom watching her stand before Judge Harrison, a federal judge with 30 years on the bench and a reputation for harsh sentences in white-collar crime cases. Mrs. Mercer, Judge Harrison said, reading from the presentence report, "You participated in a scheme to defraud your father-in-law of $87 million. You allowed him to believe his son was dead for 4 years. You facilitated multiple acts of corporate fraud and conspiracy." Simone stood perfectly still. She'd lost weight. Her designer clothes hung differently now. However, the judge continued, "Your cooperation with federal investigators directly led to the arrest and conviction of Roland Garrett. Your testimony revealed a murder-for-hire plot that likely saved 2 lives. The court recognizes your role as both perpetrator and ultimately victim of Mr. Garrett's manipulation. 5 years of home confinement, electronic monitoring, $2,300,000 in restitution payments, every cent she'd received from the fraudulent stock transfers. Permanent prohibition from serving as a corporate officer or director." She turned as the marshals led her out. Our eyes met for just a moment. I saw no defiance there, no anger, just exhaustion that mirrored my own. Roland's sentencing was in October. Maximum security federal facility. 25 years. He'd be 88 when he got out, if he got out. I didn't attend that hearing. Ronan did, though. He came back to my apartment afterward, sat at my kitchen table, and didn't speak for 20 minutes. He looked old, Ronan finally said. Smaller than I remembered. He always was, I said. We just didn't see it. The legal proceedings had taken 8 months. 8 months of depositions and hearings and motions. 8 months of watching my wife's careful planning vindicate itself in courtroom after courtroom. The bylaws she'd insisted on. The documentation she'd maintained. The steel box she'd hidden. She'd known. Somehow she'd known exactly what would be needed. The 3rd envelope came out during the final asset hearing. Judge Harrison examined it carefully, the notarized statement dated January 3, 2021, signed by Phyllis Eleanor Mercer, witnessed by her hospice nurse and a notary public. Would I, Phyllis Eleanor Mercer, being of sound mind, do hereby attest that my son Ronan James Mercer is alive and in protective custody as of this date. His death certificate, filed October 15, 2018, was procured through fraud by parties unknown to me at this time. This statement is made to provide legal basis for vacation of said death certificate and restoration of my son's legal identity should circumstances require it. Judge Harrison set the document down slowly, looked at me over his reading glasses. Mr. Mercer, your wife was either extraordinarily prescient or extraordinarily paranoid. I'm both, I said. She was both. He almost smiled. The court accepts this as sufficient basis for death certificate vacation. The Texas Department of State Health Services will be notified. Your son's legal status will be restored within 90 days. Ronan's hand found my shoulder. Squeezed once. The judge gathered his papers, then paused. Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the corporate documents extensively. Your company's bylaws were exceptionally well constructed, immune to the kind of manipulation Mr. Garrett attempted. Nearly impossible to corrupt from the inside. My wife's work, I said. She understood structural integrity. Indeed. Judge Harrison's eyes held something I couldn't quite read. One wonders if she was referring to the company bylaws or to something else she'd built with equal care. He left before I could respond, but I understood what he meant. Phyllis hadn't just protected the company. She'd protected Ronan, protected me. Built structures, legal, financial, emotional, that would hold even when she couldn't. The greatest engineering project of her life hadn't been Mercer Engineering at all. It had been us, our family, our survival, and even dead, even gone, her structures still held. 90 days after we submitted the petition, the county clerk called to say Ronan's death certificate had been officially vacated. I stood in the courthouse lobby, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the bureaucratic language that meant my son was legally alive again. Certificate number 2023-047821. Vacated by order of Dallas County Probate Court Case number 2023-CV-8847, effective immediately. Mr. Mercer, the clerk's voice was patient. Do you need me to repeat any of that? No. I looked across the marble floor to where Ronan waited by the window. I heard every word. Corinne Delaney met us in her office that afternoon with the official documents. She laid them on the conference table like artifacts, legal proof that 5 years of death had been erased with judicial ink. Order to vacate death certificate, case number 2023-CV-8847. She read aloud. Ronan Mercer is hereby restored to legal existence, effective immediately. Ronan picked up the document. His hands were steady, but I saw the way his jaw tightened as he read. 5 years of living under assumed names. 5 years of watching his own life from the outside. All of it reduced to 3 pages of court findings and administrative corrections. They're 5 years, he said quietly. I was legally dead for 5 years, and now I'm holding a piece of paper that says I was always alive. Not always alive, Corinne corrected gently. The certificate is vacated, not amended. Legally, the death certificate never should have existed, which means you were never dead. Ronan set the paper down, looked at me. I was never truly dead, Dad. I was just waiting for the right moment to come back. I understood what he meant. The patience it must have taken. The discipline. Watching Roland destroy everything while staying hidden, gathering evidence, trusting that the moment would arrive. He'd been waiting. 5 years in the shadows, collecting proof. My son, the ghost, now flesh and blood again. The restoration process took 3 weeks. Name returned to all Mercer Engineering corporate records. Tax identification reactivated. Social Security Administration notified. Every system that had marked him dead now marking him alive. By December, the company valuation was complete. Mercer Engineering $87 million in assessed value plus $15 million in damages recovered from liquidated Garrett Capital assets. Everything Roland had stolen returned. Ronan and I stood in the empty office that had been mine 40 years ago. The one I'd started in when Mercer Engineering was just me, a drafting table, and a phone. When we could rebuild it, Ronan said. Hire back the old team, take on new projects. We could. I looked at the space where my drafting table had been. Or we could build something different. He turned to face me. What did you have in mind? Your mother, I said slowly, spent her final months preparing evidence we didn't know we'd need, making sure we had every document, every recording, every piece of proof required to survive what was coming. She saved us. She saved us. And right now, there are other families facing the same thing. Elderly people declared incompetent by relatives who want their assets. Estate manipulations. Power of attorney abuse. Wrongful conservatorships. I met his eyes. Most of them don't have Phyllis Mercer's foresight. They don't have steel boxes or notarized insurance policies. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. A foundation. $5 million. The Phyllis Mercer Foundation. Free legal representation for elderly victims of financial manipulation or incompetency abuse. Mom would have liked that, he said softly. She spent her last months making sure we had the evidence to fight. Now others will have that chance too. Corinne drew up the incorporation papers in a week. 501c3 status. Board of Directors me, Ronan, and 3 independent advisors specializing in elder law. Annual budget structured for 20 to 30 cases per year. Priority given to families where financial abuse was occurring under color of legal authority. We signed the papers on December 18th in Corinne's office. She'd brought a notary, made it official. The document was simple. Articles of Incorporation. The Phyllis Mercer Foundation. Established December 18th, 2023. Purpose to provide free legal representation to elderly individuals facing financial manipulation, wrongful incompetency declarations, or estate abuse. Phyllis had built the foundation before she died. I was just pouring the concrete. My signature went on page 7, then page 12, then page 19. Each time I thought about the steel box she'd hidden, the envelopes she'd prepared, the notarized statement dated January 3rd, written when she could barely hold a pen, but still had the clarity to document everything we'd need. Ronan signed as co-founder and board member. His signature was different than I remembered, sharper, more compressed. 4 years of being someone else had changed even that. Is one more, Corinne said, sliding the final page across the table. Corporate resolution authorizing the initial $5 million endowment transfer. I picked up the pen one last time. 40 years I'd spent building structures, bridges that carried traffic across rivers, buildings that housed thousands of people, infrastructure that served entire cities, load calculations and stress analyses, and foundation depths measured in feet of reinforced concrete. This was different. I've spent 40 years building structures, I said, signing the final line. Bridges, buildings, infrastructure. This time it's different. Ronan looked up from his own signature. Different how? I set the pen down. Looked at the incorporation papers. At the foundation that would carry Phyllis's name forward. At the legal structure we'd built to protect families who couldn't protect themselves. Not concrete and steel structures this time, I said. Something more important. Corinne gathered the papers, made copies, filed them with the state. By the end of December, the foundation was operational. First case intake scheduled for January. The Phyllis Mercer Foundation, built on the ruins of everything we'd lost, constructed from the evidence she'd preserved and the justice we'd won. Not a memorial, a living structure, one that would outlast all of us. 3 days after we signed the foundation papers, Ronan asked if I wanted to see the old house site. It was a simple question. He asked it the way he asks most things, quietly, without pressure, leaving the decision entirely in my hands. I said yes before I fully understood what I was agreeing to. I hadn't been back since the engineers cleared the rubble. 18 months of deliberate avoidance. 18 months of driving alternate routes through Dallas, so I wouldn't have to pass the gravel drive, wouldn't have to see the empty lot where 40 years of living had once stood. But when Ronan pulled his truck off the road on December 21st, and the tires crunched across the familiar gravel, I looked out the passenger window and noticed something unexpected. The land looked smaller than I remembered. 40 years I had lived on this property, raised a son here, watched Phyllis kneel in the dirt every spring, pressing oak saplings into the earth with her bare hands. Those trees were 30 feet tall now, still standing still, growing indifferent to everything that had collapsed around them. The foundation was visible the moment we stepped out. Concrete slab cracked in 3 places from the structural failure, but fundamentally intact. Sound. The county inspector had reviewed it thoroughly and signed off without hesitation, structurally stable, reusable, capable of bearing new weight if we chose to build again. I stood at the edge of it and tried to remember what it had felt like to walk through the front door every evening for 4 decades. The memory was there, but distant, like a blueprint reviewed too many times to still surprise you. Do you want to rebuild it?" Ronan asked. He was standing at the far edge of the slab, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the footprint the way engineers look at everything systematically, without sentiment, processing information before forming conclusions. The old house, exactly as it was. I studied the outline of concrete beneath my feet. 2,400 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. The same floor plan I had drawn by hand in 1983, bent over my kitchen table with a mechanical pencil and graph paper, so young and certain that what I was designing would last forever. "A new home," I said. "Not a copy of the past. A new design, new structure. But still here, still on this foundation." He nodded slowly and walked the perimeter, measuring distances with his eyes the way experienced engineers do when they're calculating load-bearing capacity and stress tolerances in their heads before a single number is written down. He was looking for where the walls had failed, identifying weaknesses, understanding what the ground could still offer and what would need reinforcement. "Do you want me to consult on the architecture?" he asked. I looked at him carefully. "When did you learn architecture?" 5 years. He shrugged, the same small shrug he'd had since childhood when he wanted to minimize something significant. "I had free time. 5 years of legal death. 5 years of hiding in places I didn't know, living under conditions I still don't fully understand. And during that time, while Roland was executing his scheme and I was losing everything I thought I had built, Ronan had been quietly studying the same discipline his mother and I had devoted our professional lives to. Not wasting the years, not merely surviving them. Preparing himself to return and be useful when the time finally came. "Yes," I said. "I want you to consult." We stood on that cracked slab for another 20 minutes, discussing sightlines, solar orientation, whether the old oaks should be preserved, or whether their root systems would interfere with the new foundation work. Father and son, engineers both. Planning something that would rise from the same ground where the other thing had fallen. Christmas Day, Ronan arrived at my temporary apartment carrying coffee and carrying something else beneath his expression that I recognized immediately as the particular weight of unfinished business. "There's a third envelope," he said. "In the steel box. I found it last night when I was going through the foundation documents. I had forgotten entirely." 3 envelopes sealed in Phyllis's methodical hand. We had opened 2 during the preceding weeks, the will and the notarized statement that had restored Ronan to legal existence and unraveled Roland's carefully constructed fraud. The third envelope had been marked in her handwriting with 5 words, "Only when everything ready." "Is everything ready?" I asked. He set the envelope on my kitchen table and looked at me steadily. "Roland is in federal prison. Simone has been sentenced. The death certificate has been vacated. The foundation is operational. The company has been restored. The new house is planned." He held my gaze. "I think we're ready." The envelope was thin. No legal documents this time. No notarized statements or certified copies or language designed for courts. Just 2 pages of Phyllis's handwriting dated January 2nd, the day before the notarized statement that had documented Ronan's survival for the legal system. This letter had been written first, the personal record before the official one. Ronan read the first page aloud. His voice stayed steady but quieter than usual, the way voices go when they are working to remain controlled. To my husband and my son. If you are reading this together, then I succeeded. If you are reading separately, I failed. I took the second page from his hands and continued where he had stopped reading aloud, the words she had written while dying, while planning, while trusting that the two of us would eventually find our way to the same table. I chose silence not because I didn't trust you, but because I trusted you to find each other when it mattered most. Lawrence, you would have confronted Roland immediately, and he would have had you declared incompetent before you understood the trap. Ronan, you would have stayed hidden forever, and your father would have died alone, believing he'd lost everything. Ronan folded the letter carefully when we finished. We sat without speaking for a long time. What do you say to words from the dead, words written by someone who had known you with such precision that she could predict your failures before they occurred, and architect a path around them from her hospice bed? Phyllis had understood exactly what Lawrence Calloway would do under pressure, exactly what Ronan would do. She had built her final plan around our weaknesses the same way she had spent a career building structures around the weaknesses of soil and stress and gravity. There's more, Ronan said quietly, unfolding the page again. At the bottom. The final lines were written in handwriting slightly less controlled than the rest, the hospice medication wearing off probably, or exhaustion asserting itself at the end of a long effort. You two are the best engineers I have ever known. I believe you can rebuild anything that has been broken. We sat at that kitchen table until the coffee went completely cold. Outside, Dallas was doing what Dallas does on Christmas evening, families, gathering lights, burning in windows, the ordinary momentum of normal lives, continuing in their ordinary patterns. We had lost our claim to normal a long time ago, but we had found something that Phyllis had engineered with the same precision she brought to every blueprint and legal document and carefully considered decision. We had found our way back to each other. New Year's Eve, I lay in bed, listening to the city prepare for midnight. Fireworks already starting before the hour, impatient and bright. Car horns somewhere down the block. Distant music from parties I had not been invited to and would not have attended regardless. I let my thoughts settle over the year that was ending. January 10th, 2023. The house had collapsed. 355 days ago. Nearly a full year of exile and investigation, and courtrooms and discovery, and slow, difficult reconstruction. Now the foundation papers were signed. The company restored. Ronan legally alive. Roland in federal prison for the next 25 years. Simone under house arrest. Justice delivered. Structure rebuilt. The fireworks reached midnight, with the concentrated violence of a proper finale, explosions of color and sound that bled through the blinds in red and blue pulses. I didn't get up to watch. Just lay there in the dark, with everything still settling inside me like load, redistributing through a structure after stress, finding its new equilibrium. I was nearly asleep when I realized it. The front door, I hadn't checked the lock. 355 nights. Every single one since the collapse, I had risen at least once, sometimes 3 or 4 times, to stand at the front door of whatever temporary space I was occupying and verify that the deadbolt was fully engaged. Checking, rechecking, pressing my palm flat against the door, as though I could feel through the wood whether it was truly secure. An engineer's compulsion, maybe. Or something older and less rational, the need to confirm that what little I had left was not going to be taken while I slept. Tonight I had simply forgotten. Not forgotten because I was careless. Forgotten because somewhere between exhaustion and the fireworks and Phyllis's words, still turning quietly in my mind. The urgency had dissolved. The structure was holding. The threat had been accounted for. The lock was engaged or it wasn't, and either way I was going to sleep. I lay still and let the silence after the fireworks fill the room. It was not an empty silence. It was the silence of a foundation that has settled completely, weight distributed evenly across its surface, no stress concentrating in the places where cracks had formed. The silence of something built properly holding. A structural engineer understands this. The strongest structure is not the one that was never tested. It is the structure that bore maximum load, the weight that should have destroyed it and remained standing. Not unchanged, not unmarked, but standing and sound and capable still of bearing whatever comes next. I fell asleep before 1 in the morning. The fireworks had faded entirely. Dallas had gone quiet. The temporary apartment held the particular stillness of a year completed, a threshold crossed, the lock unchecked, the structure holding. And to you listening to my story, remember this. For 40 years I built structures out of concrete and steel. But I failed to see the cracks forming in my own family. I trusted without verifying. I assumed loyalty where there was only greed. Don't make my mistake. Pay attention to the warning signs, document everything, and understand that the people closest to you can sometimes be the ones plotting against you. The lesson I learned isn't about revenge, it's about resilience and preparation. Phyllis taught me that the strongest protection you can build isn't made of steel, it's made of evidence, documentation, and foresight. Family justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it comes completely. I believe God put me through this trial to show me what truly matters. Not the company, not the money, but the legacy of protection we leave behind. The Phyllis Mercer Foundation now helps families facing the same manipulation I endured. That's real justice. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced betrayal in your own family? What would you have done differently? Please share this with someone who needs to hear that family justice is possible. And if you want more dad's revenge stories like this one, subscribe to Wise Revenge. We share these stories so others know they're not alone. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final note: while some details in these dad's revenge stories have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, the core message about family justice and resilience remains true and important.